Kazunari is a high school student whose middle school years were pretty bleak. He wants to leave all of that behind and spend his high school life in peace. One day, he walks to the library with a book in hand, hoping that someday he can have a kind and gentle girlfriend. While there, he notices a girl quietly reading by herself. Her name is Ritsu, and she is exactly the kind of person he hopes to be with. When their eyes meet, Kazunari immediately blushes. As he is absorbed in looking for books, Tagami suddenly calls out to him and asks him to finish their assignment quickly so they can head home. Tagami admits that he is jealous of Kazunari, who is starting to live alone because his parents have moved to another city. He also asks about the boarding house Kazunari will be staying in. Kazunari explains that the previous tenant had some issues and already moved out. Kazunari is not picky. He just wants a fresh start and some freedom. That afternoon, he walks toward his new boarding house. The area is filled with old buildings, giving off a calm and peaceful atmosphere. Suddenly, he runs into a strange man who is sticking his head through a hole in a fence. Kazunari panics, but the man notices him and calls out to him by name. Kazunari is confused about how the man knows who he is. Not long after, a police officer shows up and says there has been a report about a suspicious man behaving inappropriately around young children. The man looks confused, but Kazunari points him out anyway. The man denies the accusation, insisting that anyone would be curious enough to peek through a hole in a fence. Strangely, the police officer seems to agree, comparing it to simple human curiosity like playing with a rolling cart or adjusting a chair while sitting. Kazunari cannot believe the officer is thinking that way. The officer then explains that public safety for children has been a growing concern lately. Before the officer becomes more suspicious, the man quickly clarifies that while he may have odd thoughts, he has no interest in children. He casually adds that he would rather spend time sitting around at a train station. He also mentions that he does not intend to bother anyone, although he sometimes ends up drawing attention unintentionally. The officer decides to take him to the station for further questioning. Taking advantage of the situation, Kazunari quietly slips away, even as the strange man continues calling out to him. He runs all the way to the Kawaii boarding house. There he is greeted by a middle-aged woman who invites him inside. Kazunari is still puzzled about how the man knew his name, but he tries to push the whole incident out of his mind. The woman introduces herself as Sumiko, the landlady. She leads Kazunari to his room and apologizes for the building's old appearance. Kazunari does not mind, as he thinks it is actually quite decent. When he steps into the room, he is surprised by how spacious it looks, even though it is supposed to be small. Sumiko then pulls back a curtain, revealing the actual size of the room. Suddenly, the strange man appears behind Kazunari and pats him on the shoulder. Kazunari screams in shock. It turns out that the man named Shizuru lives in the same boarding house. Kazunari finally learns that Shizuru knows his name because Sumiko told him and showed him Kazunari's photo. To make matters worse, Shizuru's room is right next to his, separated only by a thin curtain. Kazunari feels uneasy about living so close to someone like him. Sumiko explains that Kazunari just does not know Shizuru well yet and insists that he is actually a friendly person, even if he can be a bit unusual. She describes him as someone who can be selfless, although he also has some eccentric tendencies. Kazunari, however, feels that Shizuru might be trouble. Shizuru, on the other hand, seems oddly touched by Sumiko's comments. Kazunari begins to think that he should not get involved with people like them. In fact, he even considers that going back to his difficult middle school days might be better than staying there. He decides to refuse the room and plans to stay at a friend's house for the night instead. As he prepares to leave, Kazunari reflects on his dream of having a peaceful high school life and finding a kind and smart girlfriend, but the moment he opens the door, he unexpectedly runs into Ritsu. His face turns red as he sees her standing right in front of him. Sumiko and Shizuru greet Ritsu as she returns home. Kazunari wonders if this is some kind of sign or just a strange coincidence. Sumiko tells Ritsu that Kazunari will be staying at the Kawaii boarding house. Nervously, Kazunari stumbles over his words as he greets her. Shizuru tries to introduce himself again, but Kazunari is not interested. Ritsu calmly introduces herself instead. Sumiko then mentions that Ritsu goes to the same high school as Kazunari. He is shocked to realize that he might end up living under the same roof as the girl he admires. Kazunari then points out that they actually saw each other earlier at the library. Kazunari tried to start a conversation with Ritsu and kept following her, but she suddenly stopped him and pointed out that he had crossed into the women's area. Sumiko explained that the boarding house had clearly separated sections for men and women, and men were not allowed to enter the women's area. She also mentioned that the toilets and bathrooms were separated by gender. Kazunari was surprised to see how strictly these boundaries were maintained at the Kawaii residence. Not long after, Shizuru joined the conversation and made a remark that felt a bit inappropriate. Kazunari thought that someone like Shizuru could be troublesome if left living among the female residents. Sumiko reassured him not to worry, mentioning that there were plenty of precautions in place throughout the building. Shizuru, on the other hand, assumed that Kazunari had accepted the situation and said he would try not to bother him anymore, though his attitude still felt strange. Kazunari clearly did not like it and seemed annoyed. Later, Kazunari called his mother to complain about having a roommate since he had specifically asked to live alone. His mother blamed him for being too picky, reminding him that he was the one who insisted on moving out in the first place. Kazunari argued that she had not shown him enough care. His mother told him to stop complaining, pointing out that the boarding house offered a big discount and even provided breakfast and dinner. She also warned that she would stop sending him money if he kept protesting. After ending the call, Kazunari realized that what his mother said made sense. Even though the building was old, he liked its atmosphere. He then found himself wondering where Ritsu's room was. As he walked toward the women's area, hoping to catch a glimpse of her, Sumiko suddenly called out to him. Feeling awkward, Kazunari quickly explained that he had no intention of peeking. Sumiko simply smiled and invited him to have some tea. She explained that the room they were in served as a shared dining area for all the residents. Kazunari became nervous when Sumiko mentioned Ritsu's name. Shizuru commented that Ritsu was not easy to approach. Sumiko apologized for only giving advice without doing much to help. She explained that Ritsu was her nephew's granddaughter and described her as a kind person, even if she was hard to read. Sumiko hoped Kazunari could become close to her, but also reminded him not to get stuck in a one-sided friendship. After taking a bath, Kazunari noticed Ritsu walking down the hallway while reading a book. As she was about to pass through the common area, she seemed to notice him watching her. Kazunari felt happy just seeing her soft hair and wished he could get closer to her. Suddenly, Shizuru appeared and asked why Kazunari did not have a mattress in his room. Kazunari explained that his parents had not prepared one for him. Shizuru casually suggested sharing a sleeping space since the night was cold, but Kazunari immediately refused. Their conversation turned awkward, and without thinking, Kazunari made an embarrassing remark. At that moment, he realized Ritsu was looking at him with clear discomfort. He tried to explain himself, but things only got worse. Without noticing, he had stepped into the women's area again, and Ritsu reacted by firmly pushing him back out. Kazunari's ideal was to live peacefully and comfortably, but he quickly realized that life at the boarding house was far from that. The next morning, Shizuru acted dramatically, only to be startled when Kazunari suddenly opened the curtain. Shizuru did not expect to have such a sensitive roommate, while Kazunari insisted that he was the one at a disadvantage. Shizuru then asked if Kazunari ever indulged in daydreams, which Kazunari firmly denied. Shizuru found it surprising that Kazunari never imagined situations where someone might show interest in him. Shizuru also noted that Kazunari seemed to be adapting quickly and believed he would soon get along with everyone at the Kawaii residence. Kazunari agreed that getting close to Sumiko seemed easy, but felt that becoming close to Ritsu would be difficult. Ever since the incident, Ritsu avoided making eye contact with him. She even ignored him at school. Kazunari had never seen her smile, and her distant attitude felt overwhelming. Shizuru, however, found Ritsu's intense gaze exciting, comparing it to the feeling he got when talking to Mayumi and Sayaka. Curious, Kazunari asked who they were. Shizuru explained that Mayumi worked as an office employee, while Sayaka was a college student. Shizuru then showed Kazunari a photo of Mayumi. It was instantly captivated. Mayumi really did look charming, and Shizuru started to think that Kazunari's hopes might actually come true. Suddenly, Sumiko asked Shizuru to go buy some fish. Shizuru, in an odd request, asked Sumiko to scold him while giving the order. Sumiko did so bluntly, telling him to go buy the fish in a harsh tone. Unexpectedly, Shizuru seemed delighted by it. Kazunari thought that at least one of his wishes had come true. He was living with the type of woman he liked, even if reality was not quite as ideal as he had imagined. Not long after, he noticed a well-endowed woman drinking by herself. She looked heartbroken, trying to throw away a ring. Her name was Mayumi. She shouted angrily about Kenji, calling him a terrible guy. Kazunari found it surprising that someone would react like that after a breakup. Mayumi kept venting, saying she would remind Kenji of his mistakes someday and expose his embarrassing side. Kazunari wanted to leave, but he could not just ignore her when she seemed to be in danger. He warned her not to stand too close to the edge by the sea. When he finally saw her face clearly, he felt like he had seen her somewhere before. Mayumi looked at Kazunari and assumed he was trying to hit on her, which he quickly denied. She then became upset, thinking that even someone younger was not interested in her. Frustrated, she acted as if she might jump, but Kazunari grabbed her hand to keep her safe. He corrected himself, admitting that she was attractive, but that he simply was not her type. That only made Mayumi more irritated as she misunderstood his words. Kazunari tried to clarify and asked her not to jump to conclusions. Mayumi grew more unstable, but then suddenly said she was hungry and wanted a simple egg and rice meal. She gathered her empty cans but forgot her suitcase. She also mentioned that she wanted Sumiko's cooking. Kazunari picked up her suitcase while taking the cans from her. Mayumi called him a kind person and hugged him playfully. Just as things were getting awkward, Ritsu suddenly appeared and knocked Mayumi on the head. Kazunari was surprised by Ritsu's sudden arrival. Mayumi brushed it off, saying she had only been teasing Kazunari. Ritsu could smell alcohol on her breath and warned Kazunari not to get too close to Mayumi when she was drunk because she tended to act unpredictably. Kazunari thanked Ritsu, but then Mayumi suddenly lost her balance near the stairs. Kazunari worried she might fall on him. Seeing this, Ritsu quickly positioned herself below to catch her, but Mayumi stopped herself, saying she had already suffered enough and did not want to make things worse. Ritsu scolded Mayumi, and in the commotion, Mayumi slipped. Ritsu tried to hold her, but they both ended up falling onto Kazunari. When they finally returned to the boarding house, Sumiko scolded Mayumi for getting drunk carelessly outside and also reminded Ritsu to be more careful. She pointed out that they were lucky Kazunari had been there. Kazunari began to think that Mayumi's photo really did not match her real personality. Mayumi blamed Ritsu for hitting her earlier, while Ritsu nearly retaliated by throwing a dictionary at her. Sumiko raised her voice, telling them to stop arguing. She wondered why Mayumi still acted this way, since she had thought Mayumi might settle down after getting a boyfriend. She also noted that Mayumi's vacation was supposed to last one more day. Mayumi broke into tears and explained that her partner had betrayed her, even though she had trusted him. Sumiko commented that Mayumi seemed to have bad luck when it came to relationships. Shizuru added that, at least this time, it was a slight improvement compared to her past experiences. Annoyed, Mayumi hit Shizuru. They then sat down to eat dinner together, enjoying Sumiko's egg and rice dish. Kazunari found it odd, remembering that Sumiko had earlier told Shizuru to buy fish. Mayumi really enjoyed the meal, and Ritsu felt relieved to see her in better spirits. Meanwhile, Kazunari looked like he was in pain while chewing. Ritsu apologized to him, and Kazunari realized that she was not as indifferent as she seemed. Out of nowhere, Mayumi made a joking remark as a way of apologizing, which caught Kazunari off guard. Ritsu immediately reacted by hitting Mayumi again, stopping her from taking the joke any further. On a day off, Kazunari had breakfast with the residents of the Kawaii boarding house. That day, Sumiko was heading out with her friends. She asked if anyone already had plans for the weekend. Kazunari said he did not have anything going on. Ritsu planned to spend her time reading. Shizuru wanted to withdraw all her savings and dramatically lament being broke, and Mayumi intended to watch horror movies while venting her frustrations about couples going on dates. Before leaving, Sumiko reminded everyone not to do anything strange while she was away, and she firmly prohibited drinking at the boarding house. She even warned that she would raise the rent if anyone caused trouble. Sumiko specifically asked Ritsu to report everything to her, since Ritsu was her nephew's daughter. Kazunari quickly added that he would not take responsibility for his roommate's behavior. Later that day, Kazunari felt bored. He did not have a motorcycle or enough money to go anywhere. Ritsu often spent her time at the library, so he rarely saw her. He asked Shizuru what she was working on, but she simply said it was a secret. Kazunari decided not to push further, which surprised Shizuru, who wondered why he was not more curious. Feeling like he needed something to do, Kazunari listened as Shizuru invited him to play with glycerin, but he declined. Shizuru then suggested he invite Mayumi, convinced she would be interested. Kazunari went to grab a drink and glanced toward Mayumi's room. Suddenly she crawled out in a way that startled him, making him shout in surprise. Mayumi seemed confused that Kazunari did not ask what was wrong, even though she clearly looked distressed. Kazunari told her it would be easier if she acted in a more understandable way, especially since they were in the women's area and he did not want to get into trouble again. Mayumi could not understand why he worried about something so minor. Kazunari admitted he had no idea what was bothering her. He found it strange that she was not enjoying her day off, since weekends were usually when couples spent time together, something she clearly felt she was missing. Mayumi grew more discouraged, saying no man seemed interested in her, and wondering if something was wrong with her. Kazunari became irritated by her rambling and assumed she was acting out of frustration. Mayumi, in turn, was upset that she could not enjoy her holiday. Kazunari mentioned that Shizuru was planning to experiment with glycerin and thought Mayumi might enjoy it. Mayumi doubted it, saying Shizuru would be the only one having fun, and questioned why they should go along with her ideas. She even remarked that someone as eccentric as Shizuru could still take advantage of Kazunari's willingness. Mayumi assumed Kazunari must think she was pathetic. She also pointed out that he had ignored her earlier request for attention, which only made him realize how troublesome she could be. At that moment, Shizuru called him over to look outside. It turned out she was making soap bubbles. They were amazed at how large the bubbles were. Apparently, she had simply mixed glycerin with detergent. Shizuru invited them to join, and Mayumi quickly became enthusiastic again, her mood lifting as she played. Shizuru even managed to create an enormous bubble. Ritsu had just returned and was surprised to see the three of them playing together. Mayumi admired the beauty of the giant bubbles, but one suddenly popped. She grew gloomy again, saying that the beauty and joy had only been temporary. Kazunari became more annoyed hearing her complain. Shizoru suggested they just make more, but Mayumi snapped and lashed out verbally. Instead of being upset, Shizoru thanked her, clearly enjoying the attention in her own unusual way. Kazunari could only conclude that both of them were equally eccentric. Soon, Mayumi was smiling again as they continued playing. Her cheerful expression made her look much more attractive. Suddenly, they noticed Ritsu still standing nearby. Kazunari invited her to join, but she ran off. He wondered if he had said something wrong, especially since it had seemed like a perfect chance to spend time with her. Not long after, Ritsu returned and said she wanted to read her book there. Kazunari felt nervous just being near her. Mayumi commented that Ritsu could be difficult to deal with. Kazunari encouraged Ritsu to join them since there were plenty of bubbles. This time she agreed and began playing with them. Ritsu seemed to enjoy the shimmering bubbles surrounding her. When one suddenly popped and some of the solution reached her mouth, she reacted in surprise. Curious, she stuck out her tongue slightly to check the taste, only to find it bitter. Kazunari quickly looked away, flustered by the moment. Ritsu's face turned red and shyly she asked if they could make more bubbles. Kazunari became even more embarrassed hearing her say that. Mayumi patted his back, teasing that he was making progress, while Shizoru jokingly questioned whether he could still handle himself. Annoyed, Kazunari told Ritsu to ignore the two of them. Realizing her earlier actions had caused the teasing, Ritsu blushed even more. Shizoru and Mayumi quickly ran off, leaving Kazunari alone with Ritsu, who immediately slapped him in frustration. That evening during dinner, Sumiko noticed the mark on Kazunari's face. She asked if he had been doing anything inappropriate. Kazunari could not understand why he was the one being suspected, especially since Shizoru, his roommate, refused to say anything about what had actually happened that day. The next day, Mayumi was hanging out the laundry while Kazunari stood on the terrace. She mentioned that she was not going to hang her underwear outside, even if he kept waiting around. Kazunari felt confused about why Mayumi kept seeing him as a pervert when he was simply waiting for his laundry to finish. Sumiko pointed out that it had been raining a lot lately, so she was sure Kazunari's clothes would often end up piling up. Mayumi teased him, suggesting he clean his room so it would not smell unpleasant. Kazunari told her not to bring up things like that on such a nice sunny day. Mayumi then wondered why Kazunari did not react at all when she joked about those topics. She expected at least some kind of flustered response, but he stayed completely calm. She could not figure out what kind of guy he really was. Not long after, Kazunari's laundry dried and he quickly went to collect it. While thinking about what Mayumi had said earlier, he suddenly noticed something lying in front of him. He thought it looked like a piece of clothing and wondered why it was there and who had dropped it. Slowly, he reached out to pick it up, unsure if it belonged to Mayumi or if it was some kind of trap. Just then, Shizoru showed up and Kazunari nervously asked if there were any police officers nearby. Shizoru had no idea what he was talking about. She picked up the object and revealed that it was actually just a hair tie. Right after that, Mayumi came over and said it was hers. She looked at Shizoru's outfit with curiosity. Shizoru explained that all her clothes were being washed, so she had no choice but to dress that way. Kazunari commented that she seemed to have completely lost her sense of embarrassment. Shizoru casually replied that she was still wearing shorts under the towel. Sumiko remarked that Shizoru kept lowering her standards. Shizoru then shared that back in middle school, she had been nicknamed something like a mischievous general because of her bold personality. She even joked about inviting everyone else to join her. Soon after, Ritsu arrived carrying some curtains from the hallway. Kazunari, Mayumi, and Shizoru looked quite comfortable around each other. Sumiko observed that Kazunari seemed to be adapting well to his new social environment. She asked Ritsu if she wanted to join them and then requested her help in taking down the curtains from the back room. At the same time, she asked Kazunari to help Ritsu. The two of them worked together to remove the curtains. Kazunari tried to start a conversation, asking if Ritsu liked reading since he often saw her at the library. Unfortunately, her responses were short and a bit stiff. Kazunari realized that she was probably used to being alone, which made casual conversation harder for her. After finishing, they headed to the backyard. Kazunari thought he should lighten the mood but could not think of what to say. Suddenly, a strong gust of wind blew through, sending a blanket flying and lifting Shizoru's clothes slightly. Kazunari joked about it as if they were witnessing a dramatic artistic moment, calling it part of the unique culture of the kawaii boarding house. Ritsu could not hold back her laughter. Shizoru even struck a playful pose, which made Ritsu laugh even harder. Mayumi was surprised to see both of them laughing so freely together. Later, they all gathered around the dining table. Sumiko asked what had made them laugh so much earlier. Ritsu quietly asked Kazunari not to explain the real reason. Kazunari simply said they had been talking about art. Sumiko felt happy because it had been a long time since she had heard Ritsu laugh that openly. Kazunari looked at Ritsu, who seemed a bit shy, and felt like he had made some progress with her. However, while walking down the hallway later, Kazunari found something that looked like a hair tie. When he picked it up, he realized it was actually a piece of clothing. At that exact moment, Ritsu hit him with a stick. The small step forward he thought he had made with her suddenly turned into a big step backward. Kazunari continued living his daily life at the Kawaii boarding house. One day, Mayumi suddenly pinned him down and invited him to watch a horror movie together. Unexpectedly, Shizuru joined in and ended up on top of him as well. Kazunari called out to Ritsu and Sumiko for help. Confused, he asked why Shizuru was going along with it. She explained that Mayumi had dragged her into it, though she admitted she did not entirely mind the situation because she found it amusing. Sumiko came over after hearing the noise and smiled at their antics. Mayumi apologized and said she originally just wanted to invite them to watch a movie, but when she saw them playing Othello, she ended up wanting to join in instead. Kazunari jokingly blamed Mayumi for putting him in such an awkward situation. Shizuru suspected that something had happened to Mayumi earlier, since one of her coworkers had invited her out for drinks. Mayumi brushed it off and said everything was fine, though she mentioned that her junior colleague had recently announced plans to get married. Feeling a bit emotional, Mayumi insisted on watching a horror movie together, and this time Sumiko agreed. Sumiko got everything ready before watching the horror movie by lighting some candles. Mayumi praised her for doing such a great job. On top of that, Sumiko tried to persuade Ritsu to join them. Kazunari also complimented Sumiko's effort. Ritsu turned it down and Mayumi guessed that she was just scared. But Ritsu denied it, saying it would only be a waste of time. Out of nowhere, Mayumi mentioned that in horror movies, people who walk alone are usually the first to die. Sumiko added that watching horror films could invite spirits. Hearing that made Ritsu visibly uneasy. Shizuru had already decorated the hallway, and Ritsu started to feel even more nervous, especially after Mayumi and Sumiko pointed out that her room was the farthest away and might feel unsettling. In the end, Ritsu decided to join them and watch the horror movie together. For Mayumi, the most enjoyable part of horror films was how the foolish couples always met their fate first. At that moment, Ritsu looked genuinely frightened, though she insisted she was just sleepy. Kazunari couldn't help but notice how adorable she looked when she was scared. Shizuru commented that one of the actresses in the film looked like Sayaka. Kazunari remembered that Sayaka was one of the residents at the Kawaii complex and wondered if she might be a sweet person. Kazunari asked Ritsu to watch for a moment, but she refused. He reassured her that it was just a normal scene. Wanting to confirm whether the actress really resembled Sayaka, Kazunari encouraged her again. When Ritsu finally opened her eyes, she was immediately met with a terrifying scene. Both she and Kazunari screamed at the same time. Kazunari quickly apologized, saying he did not mean to scare her. Ritsu called him a liar, and he kept apologizing over and over. Meanwhile, Mayumi suddenly thought that she might want to take revenge on Kazunari for that moment. According to her, the movie was not even that scary. Sumiko asked if Ritsu was okay, and Ritsu seemed to be holding back, clearly uncomfortable. Mayumi offered to accompany her to the bathroom, assuring her that there was nothing scary in the hallway. However, they suddenly screamed when they ran into a girl. Hearing the commotion, Kazunari and Shizuru became curious. The girl hugged Mayumi tightly and said it had been a long time since they last met, wondering why the hallway was so dark. Kazunari was surprised to see her. The girl turned out to be Sayaka. She introduced herself to Kazunari in a friendly manner. Kazunari thought she seemed like a normal girl. Sayaka admitted that she tended to be playful and liked hugging people, though she actually wanted to change that habit. Kazunari did not expect her to be so comfortable with physical closeness. Mayumi called Kazunari foolish for getting caught up in Sayaka's bothersome behavior. Sayaka apologized to anyone who found her annoying. Mayumi, still irritated, openly said that Sayaka really was a handful. She warned Kazunari not to act inappropriately. Kazunari explained that he had been surrounded by all kinds of personalities, including older men with questionable behavior, aloof girls, and girls who liked to drink. Mayumi grew even more annoyed when she noticed Kazunari getting flustered around Sayaka. In her frustration, she even joked about teaching him a harsh lesson. Sayaka then commented that Kazunari and Mayumi seemed very close. Mayumi replied that a lot had happened while Sayaka was away, and that she now considered Kazunari a close friend. Sayaka responded by asking if she was not also Mayumi's friend. Kazunari began to question again whether Sayaka was truly as normal as he first thought. At that moment, Ritsu quietly apologized, wondering if she came across as an indifferent girl. After living at the Kawaii boarding house for quite some time, Kazunari still found that Ritsu remained distant toward him. One day he invited her to walk home together, but she stayed silent. Not long after, Tagami asked Kazunari to head home together instead. Tagami pointed out that Ritsu lived in the same boarding house as Kazunari and wondered if he might be interested in her. He even said that Kazunari's taste was unusual, describing Ritsu as gloomy, antisocial, and someone who kept to herself. In reality, Kazunari was not attracted to Ritsu in that way. He simply wanted to get closer to her. When Kazunari returned to the boarding house, Sumiko told him that his delivery had arrived in the backyard. He was excited to see the bicycle he had bought with his allowance. He imagined that one day, his future girlfriend would ride along with him, enjoying the sunset together. Suddenly, Mayumi and Shizuru tried to get on the bike, and Kazunari immediately stopped them. Mayumi called him stingy, while Kazunari accused her of trying to take his bike ride. Mayumi seemed to understand that Kazunari bought the bike for that purpose and started talking about her past romance during her school days, though those memories were not very pleasant. Out of nowhere, Shizuru tied a knot in the bike's rear seat strap, making it difficult for Kazunari to undo. Sumiko mentioned that Shizuru was known for being skilled with tying and untying knots. Kazunari grew frustrated, feeling like they had ruined his dream. Not long after, Sayaka and Ritsu came home together. Kazunari felt awkward about starting a conversation with Ritsu. Sayaka suggested that starting the next day, Ritsu could ride along with Kazunari. He admitted he did not mind at all and even said the bike was meant for that. Unfortunately, Ritsu immediately ignored him when she noticed the knot on the bike's seat. Kazunari wondered why something always seemed to get in the way whenever he tried to get closer to Ritsu. Sayaka suddenly asked if he actually liked Ritsu. He denied it and explained that he only wanted to be friends since they lived in the same place and went to the same school. He also mentioned that Ritsu was enjoyable to talk to. Right after saying that, Kazunari realized he might have gone a bit too far with the compliment. He felt concerned because Ritsu was always by herself. Shizuru then asked about the last thing he had said, but Kazunari avoided the topic by going to see Sumiko. At that moment, Shizuru began to notice that every time Kazunari tried to move forward, something always got in his way. The next day, Kazunari felt happy riding his bike to school. He tried to talk to Ritsu again and offered her a ride, but she immediately refused. Hearing that, Kazunari assumed no one would want to ride along with him. He then left for school on his own. In reality, Ritsu had not meant to reject him so firmly. She actually had no issue with riding together, but she felt very embarrassed. Not long after, Mayumi and Sayaka teased Ritsu for refusing the offer. Shizuru even joked about inviting someone who would turn him down. Sumiko joined in as well, and their teasing began to annoy Ritsu. She pointed out that the boarding house actually belonged to her family, and Sumiko admitted she was only managing it since Ritsu's mother was the rightful heir. Ritsu then warned them that, as the daughter of the heir, she could raise the rent by 50%. That shocked everyone. Ritsu walked to school, still thinking about Kazunari's invitation. Meanwhile, Kazunari kept thinking about her too. He felt it was natural for her to refuse, assuming she might have misunderstood his intentions. That day, Kazunari had duty at the library. He wondered if Ritsu would be there, believing she would not expect him to show up. When he entered, Ritsu apologized for what happened earlier. She realized she had overreacted and explained that it was not that she did not want to ride with him. She simply preferred reading while walking, felt embarrassed about riding with a boy, and worried that the other residents would tease her. At that moment, she seemed unsure of what to do. Kazunari reassured her, saying he understood her reasons. Ritsu then asked him not to invite her again in the future. After that, Kazunari began to feel that whether he became close to Ritsu or not was no longer the main issue. The situation felt a bit strange to him, and he came to accept that maybe his preferences really were a little unusual. That afternoon, Kazunari was confused when he saw Shizuru squeezing Mayumi while Sumiko stepped on Shizuru in return. Mayumi was irritated because Sayaka had pointed out that she had been dumped by a guy. Sayaka insisted that it was simply the truth and even commented on Mayumi's mismatched underwear. Mayumi found it annoying that Sayaka treated her so casually despite them both being women, and she snapped at Kazunari for staring in their direction. She then realized Kazunari was actually looking at Ritsu. Kazunari walked over to Ritsu and asked what was wrong with her. Ritsu said she was fine and quickly left. Still, Kazunari was certain he had just seen her crying. At that moment, Mayumi's phone started ringing, but she refused to answer. Shizuru and Sumiko were convinced it had to be her ex calling. Not long after, Mayumi received a message from him saying he missed hearing her voice. She looked happy, but she brushed it off, claiming she only felt a little sympathy and did not expect anything more. She reasoned that since they had not talked in a long time, it was only natural for him to reach out again. Sayaka could not understand why Mayumi was so quick to feel sorry for a guy. Her phone kept ringing, and Mayumi eventually said that her ex would probably keep calling unless she picked up, so she stepped outside to answer it. Ritsu watched her, noticing how cheerful she seemed. Kazunari could not understand why Mayumi was willing to reconnect with someone who had such a bad personality. Suddenly, Ritsu said that she had started to understand something. Kazunari was puzzled by what she meant. The next morning at breakfast, Sayaka asked if Mayumi had gotten back together with her ex. Mayumi denied it and said she was just teasing him a little because he was being talkative. Shizuru suspected that Mayumi might still be getting treated poorly by him. Mayumi insisted that her ex had changed after they broke up and made it clear that she was not someone easy to take advantage of. Then her ex called again, and Mayumi quickly answered. Kazunari could barely watch, feeling frustrated that she seemed so easily pulled in. Shizuru figured that Mayumi must still have strong feelings for him. Ritsu then wondered out loud when someone truly knows it is time to give up, before heading back to her room. Kazunari found her behavior strange and briefly thought that maybe she liked someone. He quickly dismissed the idea, convincing himself that Ritsu was always alone and unlikely to be interested in anyone like that. Later, Shizuru made a rubber band gun and was sure Mayumi would like it, just like she had enjoyed the soap bubbles before. Kazunari had a feeling Shizuru was inviting trouble again. That afternoon, as soon as Kazunari arrived at the boarding house, Mayumi asked him to tell Sumiko she would not be there for dinner. Kazunari asked if she was going to meet that unreliable guy. Mayumi admitted she did not actually want to get back together with her ex, but he kept asking to meet. Kazunari mentioned that Shizuru had made a rubber band gun and that they were planning to have chicken and egg rice for dinner. He then told her to be careful on her way. Mayumi did not really understand what he meant. As Mayumi greeted Ritsu, who had just returned, Ritsu asked if she was going to meet that guy and whether it made her happy. Mayumi found the question surprising. While having dinner with her ex, Kenji, Mayumi kept thinking about what Kazunari and Ritsu had said earlier. Kenji asked if she always ate so slowly. Mayumi just smiled, even though she felt annoyed because she did not like Italian food, something she had already mentioned when they first started dating. When Kenji asked if she was nervous, she denied it, even though she was actually irritated and struggling to stay calm. Kenji then suggested they go to his place. He tried to charm her, calling her sweet and suggesting they bring cake home and enjoy dessert together. Mayumi refused, making it clear that she was not someone who could be easily fooled. She decided to end things for good. As she left, she could not help but think it would have been nice to have Shizuru's rubber band gun with her, just for confidence. Mayumi returned to the boarding house and asked about the chicken and egg rice. Sumiko told her she had made omelette rice instead. Mayumi complained to Kazunari, who admitted he had just been joking earlier. Ritsu felt relieved when Mayumi came back and they immediately hugged. Mayumi was surprised to see Ritsu crying for her. Ritsu explained that the main character in a book she had been reading reminded her of Mayumi, someone who kept falling for the wrong kind of guys, and that the story had really moved her. Sumiko added that Ritsu was easily influenced by what she read. Ritsu had initially said she felt sorry for Mayumi and hoped she would become more mature, which only made Mayumi more annoyed. Kazunari, however, realized once again how unusual Ritsu could be, and that thought oddly reassured him, as it meant there was probably still no guy she liked. The next day, on his way back to the boarding house, Kazunari noticed that Sayaka was caught up in a tense situation with a man. The guy looked intimidating, which made Kazunari uneasy. He called out to Sayaka, and she immediately moved closer to him for protection. The man, clearly annoyed, demanded to know what kind of relationship Kazunari had with her. Kazunari explained that they were just neighbors at the boarding house, but Sayaka quickly claimed that they lived together and asked the man to leave Kazunari alone. Kazunari found himself confused about how things had escalated so quickly. The man questioned why Sayaka would be interested in someone like Kazunari, whom he saw as immature. Sayaka explained that she had only been looking for an older brother figure in the man. Even though she was speaking to him, her eyes kept drifting toward Kazunari. She added that she preferred younger guys who were cute. Kazunari became even more confused by her words. The man then asked if Kazunari would still deny any connection after hearing that. Kazunari admitted that he did not even understand what was going on. Frustrated, the man raised his hand as if to hit Kazunari to settle things. Suddenly, a book flew through the air and struck the man. It turned out to be Ritsu's book. She calmly said that the wind had blown it away and then walked into the boarding house. Kazunari was about to follow her, but the man stopped him. The man asked whether Kazunari had any kind of relationship with Ritsu, pointing out how obvious it was that she had just helped him. Kazunari's face turned red at the comment. Just as the man was about to lash out again, Shizuru showed up along with a police officer, which finally put an end to the situation. During dinner that evening, Sumiko commented that Kazunari had incredibly bad luck that day. Shizuru explained that he had actually been busy picking up discarded adult magazines on the street when the police officer showed up and brought him back. Kazunari could not believe that he had been saved by someone so unusual. Sayaka apologized to Kazunari for dragging him into trouble, but he reassured her that it was not her fault. Mayumi, however, bluntly stated that it was indeed Sayaka's fault since she often teased men without genuinely liking them. Sayaka insisted that she did not mean any harm. Mayumi reacted with visible frustration towards Sayaka's behavior. Sumiko reminded Sayaka not to bring personal problems into the boarding house. Ritsu added that she would raise the rent if Sayaka caused trouble again. Sayaka apologized and promised not to repeat it. She also wondered how the man had found her address since she had tried to keep it private. Mayumi told Sayaka to stop leading men on, but Sayaka argued that it was the men who kept pursuing her. She even asked Mayumi for advice on how to turn someone down properly, which only made Mayumi more irritated. Shizuru suggested that it might be better to just be honest with the man, but Sayaka immediately reacted by hitting him lightly in frustration. Later that night, Kazunari thanked Ritsu for helping him by throwing the book earlier. Ritsu explained that she had only thrown it because the man was blocking the entrance. Kazunari still expressed his gratitude, especially since the book she threw seemed important to her. He praised her, saying that she was amazing, and mentioned how she had helped Mayumi before as well. He also noted that she could be a bit reckless and advised her to be more careful. Ritsu's face turned red as she listened. She asked Kazunari not to exaggerate his praise. Blushing even more, she quickly walked away, leaving Kazunari wondering if she felt embarrassed because of his gratitude. He found her reaction surprisingly cute and could not help but feel happy. From a distance, Mayumi and Sayaka watched the interaction. Sayaka then approached Kazunari and told him that Ritsu might seem fine on the outside, but she was actually quite lonely. She suggested that Kazunari should look out for her. Sayaka added that she believed their relationship would grow closer and promised to support him. Her words boosted Kazunari's confidence. Mayumi, on the other hand, muttered that Sayaka could be really troublesome. Suddenly, Sumiko appeared and warned Sayaka once again that her rent would go up if she caused any more issues. Meanwhile, Kazunari felt energized and motivated after receiving Sayaka's encouragement. One day after school, Kazunari asked Ritsu to walk back to the boarding house together. He wore a warm smile that made Ritsu blush a little. Kazunari felt genuinely happy just being able to walk beside her. When Ritsu noticed him guiding his bicycle instead of riding it, she asked if the tire was flat. Kazunari wondered if Ritsu was subtly suggesting that he should head home first, but he decided not to take that hint. He said they were almost there anyway and that he wanted to enjoy the scenery from the bridge while walking. Since they lived under the same roof, he felt he should be more attentive. When Ritsu closed her book, Kazunari was a bit surprised, and it made him feel more certain that she might be opening up to him. He recalled what Sayaka had told him the day before, that he should look out for Ritsu because deep down she was lonely. Kazunari wondered if he should take the initiative like Sayaka suggested and thought it might be worth trying. That night, Sumiko brought several bottles of sake she had received from a friend for the residents to share. However, she advised Ritsu and Kazunari to stick with juice since they were still underage. Mayumi surprised everyone by declining to drink. She admitted that she had been overdoing it lately and wanted to cut back, especially since alcohol was not great for her skin. Sumiko commented on how little Mayumi was eating, even though she usually had a big appetite. Sayaka mentioned that Mayumi's fuller figure looked better before, in a teasing way, but Mayumi firmly stated that her body was not something to joke about. She wondered why Sayaka sometimes acted like her past partners. Not long after, Mayumi's phone rang. She said it was a call from a friend. Meanwhile, Sumiko continued chatting and drinking with Shizuru and Sayaka. After ending the call, Mayumi suddenly grabbed Shizuru's glass and drank from it. Clearly frustrated, she lightly tapped the glass against Shizuru's head in annoyance. She explained that her friend had just started dating someone from a wealthy family and had tried to set Mayumi up on a blind date. The plan was for her friend's partner to introduce a coworker to Mayumi, but along the way, her friend also suggested that Mayumi should lose weight. In the end, her friend broke up with that partner, and the blind date opportunity disappeared. Mayumi felt conflicted, unsure whether she should feel disappointed, sympathetic, or even a little relieved, and she was worried about reacting the wrong way. Kazunari thought that Mayumi's intentions were not entirely pure to begin with, especially since her expression looked like a mix of disappointment and amusement, which came across as a bit unsettling. Mayumi said she did not want to seem like someone who takes pleasure in another person's misfortune, but at the same time, she did not really consider that person a close friend. Sumiko asked if that meant Mayumi did not actually like her, and Mayumi nodded. Sumiko concluded that in that case, the person was not truly her friend. Mayumi then realized why she had taken her frustration out on Shizuru, though Shizuru did not seem particularly bothered by it. As the night went on, Mayumi became a bit tipsy. She shared her thoughts that women tend to have only a few close friends, while others are more like acquaintances, and that there are often unspoken rules in friendships, which she found exhausting. Sayaka said she understood that feeling. Ritsu gently pointed out that Mayumi should not assume everyone saw things the same way. Sayaka then asked how Mayumi viewed her. Mayumi described Sayaka as someone who often stirred up trouble in friendships, though she said it in a half-joking tone. Sayaka then suggested that Ritsu herself did not seem very interested in making friends. Hearing that, Kazunari grew concerned that Sayaka's comment might hurt Ritsu. Ritsu explained that it was not by choice. She said that in her class, there were no students from her old middle school. Only a few people from her previous school had gone to the same high school, and most of them were boys. Because of that, she never really had the chance to build friendships with her classmates, and eventually she got used to being on her own. Hearing this, Kazunari became even more convinced that Ritsu had grown accustomed to solitude. Meanwhile, Sayaka continued playfully teasing Mayumi, while Mayome tried to push her away. Seeing that both of them were quite drunk, Sumiko suggested ending the gathering for the night. Later, in the bedroom, Kazunari told Shizuru that he was worried about Ritsu feeling lonely. Shizuru responded that high school students often feel pressure to follow trends in order to fit into social circles, which can be exhausting. He brought up an example of a past trend involving loose socks. Then he jokingly imagined what it would be like if there were trends involving other types of clothing, though his comment drifted off topic. Kazunari realized that Shizuru's thoughts were not really helping and decided it was better to go to sleep. That night, Kazunari could not stop thinking about whether Ritsu had truly meant what she said about enjoying being alone, or if she had just been putting on a front. The next day, he noticed Ritsu quietly reading a book by herself again. It seemed like she really did enjoy those moments. Kazunari had seen her smile and act shy before, but more often than not, she spent her time sitting in the corner of the living room, absorbed in her reading. That afternoon, Kazunari walked home with Ritsu. She looked a bit surprised and asked if he had been worried about what she said the day before. Ritsu told him not to worry, explaining that she actually preferred things the way they were. She felt she did not need to stress about missing TV shows because she got absorbed in reading, and she never felt pressured to reply to messages quickly since no one complained. Ritsu simply did not like being disturbed when she was reading novels on her phone. She also did not feel awkward suggesting a change of plans, like leaving an amusement park to go to a bookstore, since she often did things on her own anyway. Even so, Kazunari believed that despite what she said, Ritsu still felt lonely. He wanted to help her. Ritsu, however, felt that Kazunari was worrying about her too much. She thought he must have been having a hard time adjusting to the unique personalities at the Kawaii complex. Kazunari realized that she seemed concerned about him instead. He smiled and admitted that he was doing just fine. Ritsu praised him, saying he was impressive. She had assumed he was just an ordinary person, but it turned out he was able to socialize quite easily, just like everyone else. On the other hand, Kazunari thought Ritsu saw him as someone admirable, and that made him feel confident he was on the right track. His enthusiasm grew, believing his efforts to get closer to her were working. When they got home, Kazunari looked energized, while Ritsu seemed a little down. After that, Kazunari started approaching Ritsu whenever and wherever he could. It seemed to make her somewhat uncomfortable. One morning after breakfast, Ritsu left for school, and Kazunari immediately followed after her. Seeing this, Mayumi commented that he reminded her of a hamster she had at home. After school, Kazunari would often wait for Ritsu to pass by, but that afternoon she did not show up. He decided to check the bookstore where he found her reading. Just as he was about to call out to her, he noticed two girls approaching and surprising her. They seemed close to Ritsu. They were her middle school friends whom she had not seen in a long time. They mentioned that no one had really heard from Ritsu, since only a few of their middle school classmates attended the same high school as her. They had been worried that she might feel lonely and noted that she still tended to drift off in her thoughts. Watching them chat, Kazunari realized that Ritsu was capable of connecting easily with others. Her friends exchanged contact information and hoped to hang out together again sometime. Seeing Ritsu smile happily made Kazunari feel relieved. However, Ritsu suddenly noticed Kazunari watching her. She seemed uneasy and quickly left. Kazunari did not understand why she ran away, so he followed her and tried to talk. He asked if she was happy to see her old friends again. Ritsu, clearly frustrated, told him to stop acting overly concerned and making assumptions about her, saying she was tired of it. Kazunari was shocked to hear that. Realizing she had gone too far, Ritsu felt guilty, apologized, and left right away. That night, Kazunari looked troubled as he lay in the hallway. Mayumi even joked about stepping on him, and Kazunari said he would not mind because he was feeling down. Mayumi remarked that he seemed to have picked up Shizuru's odd tendencies. She guessed that Kazunari must have done something to upset Ritsu. Kazunari wondered why she had to point that out so directly, and Mayumi simply smiled teasingly. She added that he really did remind her of her hamster. Mayumi also said she had told him not to take Sayaka's words too seriously. Kazunari had trusted Sayaka completely because she said that Ritsu had started opening up to him, which was why he had been so eager to get closer to her. According to Mayumi, Sayaka had not exactly lied, but Kazunari could not really be considered close to Ritsu yet. Hearing this, Kazunari realized he had been stuck in a cycle of false hope. He also admitted to himself that he had brought this situation upon himself. Mayumi described Sayaka as someone who could be quite manipulative, comparing Kazunari to prey caught in her trap. Kazunari could not believe that Sayaka would do that to him, and he questioned why he had trusted her so easily. Frustrated, Mayumi lightly kicked his head. The next morning, Shizuru noticed Ritsu sitting alone in the backyard and found it a bit unusual. He was convinced that she was feeling down, and he suspected something might have happened between her and Kazunari. Shizuru mentioned that Kazunari had also seemed troubled since the day before. He recalled how Kazunari once said he worried about Ritsu being lonely, and Shizuru had already expected that something like this would happen. Back then, Kazunari had seen Shizuru spending time with Ritsu. At that moment, Ritsu asked whether she looked lonely. She explained that she had no interest in forcing herself into social circles she could not relate to, nor did she feel the need to ask for someone's phone number if she knew she would never contact them. It was not that she disliked people, she simply preferred conversations to end quickly. However, she often found herself going along with them, putting on a polite smile. She did not mind being alone, and she also did not want others to see her as lonely. Ritsu often felt conflicted, and Kazunari had noticed that. Suddenly, Shizuru teased her and asked if she had ended up blaming herself again. According to him, that kind of feeling was completely normal for young people. Ritsu admitted that she did not hate her current situation. Shizuru added that it was common for young people to want everything about themselves to be perfect, and he used to feel the same way. Hearing their conversation, Kazunari realized that he had misunderstood things. Shizuru explained that, at the same time, Ritsu would eventually come to accept herself as she was. Because of that, he encouraged her not to dwell in uncertainty and to live more cheerfully. Meanwhile, Kazunari was surprised that Ritsu could open up so honestly to Shizuru. He briefly wondered if she might have feelings for him, but after listening to their conversation, it did not seem to be the case. Shizuru then joked that Ritsu's words were as sharp as Sumiko's. Ritsu did not appreciate the comparison and immediately hit Shizuru in protest. The following day, Kazunari tried to follow the signals Ritsu had given and avoided acting overly attentive toward her. He stood beside her, yet somehow felt a distance between them. At a crosswalk, Kazunari noticed that Ritsu remained absorbed in her book even though the signal had already turned in their favor. He stayed with her, and to his surprise, the light changed 4 times, yet she did not move at all. He began to worry about whether she would make it home safely, considering the steady flow of vehicles that could be dangerous. He also realized that she had been coming home late quite often lately. After waiting long enough, Kazunari finally spoke up and told her it was time to cross. Ritsu was startled to see him standing beside her. Kazunari explained that it was not intentional for them to walk home together, but he could not just leave her there alone. He added that she did not have to talk to him, but he reminded her that the road could be dangerous. He joked that he might look like a guide for crossing streets, but not someone who could guide her heart. Ritsu laughed at that remark, calling him strange, like a comedian. Kazunari smiled, feeling that this was how their friendship was supposed to be. He commented that Ritsu was unusual, though she soon returned to reading her book with a serious expression. They continued walking together, and Kazunari pointed out a rainbow he noticed in the sky. Ritsu was captivated by its beauty. Kazunari apologized for interrupting her while she was enjoying her book. Suddenly, Ritsu softly said thank you, though Kazunari could not hear it clearly at first. Still, he smiled and responded to her gratitude. Ritsu, on the other hand, felt extremely embarrassed when she realized that he had actually heard her quiet words. To make sure Ritsu stayed safe on her way home, Kazunari always walked back with her. Even just being together like that already made him happy. Before they realized it, they had reached the boarding house gate. Kazunari opened the door, and he was startled to find Sayaka getting a bit too physically affectionate with Mayumi. It was definitely not something people usually saw right at someone's front entrance. Even so, Kazunari was no longer that surprised by situations like this. Mayumi felt annoyed because Kazunari did nothing to step in. Ritsu told Sayaka that if she wanted to act like that, she should at least do it inside her room instead of right at the entrance. Kazunari noticed a strong smell of sake when Sayaka spoke. Ritsu wondered why Sayaka had been drinking so early in the day. Mayumi quickly clarified that she had not been drinking at all. She had just gotten back from work when Sayaka suddenly approached her at the front door. Sayaka insisted she only wanted to give Mayumi a warm welcome with a hug and a kiss. She kept pushing forward, while Mayumi tried her best to protect her personal space. Suddenly, Sayaka leaned in even closer and playfully pressed her face against Mayumi's. Mayumi shouted and tried to push her away. Luckily, Sumiko showed up just in time and pulled Sayaka back, stopping her behavior. Once Sayaka had calmed down, she apologized to Mayumi. Sumiko asked what had gotten into her. Since earlier that day she had already been drinking, Sayaka explained that the night before, she had gone out drinking with her group. Shizuru found that odd, since he thought Sayaka's previous group had already fallen apart because of her behavior. Sayaka casually replied that this was a new group. Mayumi confidently said that Sayaka's new group would probably fall apart in less than 2 months. Sayaka then shared that at a party she had run into another group, only to realize her ex was there too. To keep things from turning awkward, she forced herself to stay cheerful the whole time. Unfortunately, her ex kept sticking close to her and even tried to get too close in a way that made her uncomfortable. Sayaka ended up reacting strongly to push him away. Because of that unpleasant experience, she jokingly said she needed Mayumi's warm welcome to forget about it. Mayumi could not believe that reasoning at all. Sayaka admitted she really disliked exes who suddenly tried to come back. Mayumi commented that some people just had a hard time moving on, not realizing they had already been left behind. Hearing that, Kazunori and the others thought that maybe Mayumi's own ex had been subtly trying to keep her tied down, even if she did not notice it. Kazunori then pointed out that maybe Mayumi herself had not fully moved on. Mayumi immediately denied it, saying she was not someone who fell easily. She explained that at the time, she had just been frustrated and needed someone to lean on emotionally. According to her, men tended to store romantic memories in separate folders, while women often replaced one experience with another. She admitted that she preferred to overwrite her past relationships. Sumiko asked how long Mayumi had been doing that. Sayaka responded that it explained why Mayumi kept ending up in the same situations. Mayumi did not understand what she meant. Sayaka pointed out that almost every guy who got close to Mayumi turned out to be problematic. Mayumi tried to deny it, but Sayaka exaggerated the number even more. According to Sayaka, it would be better to keep those bad patterns in a separate mental space, study how those guys acted, and use that as a reference to make better choices in the future. Unfortunately, Mayumi kept overwriting everything, which made her fall for the same kind of approach again and again. Hearing that explanation, Kazunori finally understood. Ritsu added that it was like when an ex came back, but the data used to judge him was already corrupted, making Mayumi vulnerable to being persuaded repeatedly. Sayaka then said that Ritsu was actually a more complicated case. Normally, when someone showed interest, people would store that data temporarily and evaluate it later, but Ritsu carefully examined every single detail without exception. She spent so much time analyzing that nothing ever really moved forward. Sayaka claimed that Ritsu was even more difficult to deal with than Mayumi. Kazunori wondered that if Sayaka understood Ritsu that well, why she still tried to push her into situations like that. Sayaka replied that even though Mayumi was troublesome, she was still easier to handle. Mayumi questioned whether that was supposed to be a compliment, though she clearly found Sayaka irritating. Shizuharu then asked what they thought about him. At the same time, Sayaka and Mayumi answered that his hard drive had already been completely broken from the start. Shizuharu looked genuinely shocked to hear that assessment. Ritsu asked Sayaka not to jump to conclusions so quickly, since Ritsu did not have the same kind of track record as Mayumi. Sayaka replied that having no track record basically meant having no experience in romance. Ritsu looked annoyed and admitted that she was not interested in that kind of thing. Hearing that, Kazunori suddenly felt a sense of excitement. After finding out that Ritsu had never dated anyone, Sayaka jokingly said she wanted to take Ritsu's first kiss. Ritsu was startled, and Kazunori quickly stepped in, blocking Sayaka with his arm. Sayaka laughed it off, saying she was only kidding. Kazunori, however, noticed a soft sensation on his arm. When he turned toward Ritsu, he saw that she looked embarrassed. Ritsu immediately ran to her room and Kazunori followed after her. Mayumi remarked that their youth still seemed a bit unpolished, while Sumiko said that Sayaka was the source of all the chaos, prompting Sayaka to apologize right away. Meanwhile, Kazunori could not catch up to Ritsu because she had already rushed into her room. He wondered why things always turned out like that. The sensation on his arm lingered in his mind, leaving him flustered until Sumiko suddenly startled him. Kazunori worried that Ritsu might be upset with him, but Sumiko thought otherwise. Kazunori felt like everything he did around Ritsu kept going wrong, and he did not even know how he should act anymore. Sumiko advised him that Ritsu might like being alone sometimes, but that did not mean she always wanted to be left alone. Kazunori commented that Ritsu seemed difficult to deal with, and Sumiko reminded him that Ritsu had always been hard to figure out. The next morning at breakfast, Kazunori and Ritsu ended up sipping their soup at the same time. Mayumi got annoyed and said that instead of doing that, they might as well just kiss. Both Kazunori and Ritsu choked on their food. Mayumi complained that their shy and innocent behavior was frustrating to watch. Kazunori then noticed that Ritsu's face had turned red all the way to her ears. Later, when Kazunori returned to the boarding house feeling overheated, Mayumi suddenly sprayed water at him.